Mina's picture-perfect life was shattered when her partner Jun-ho left her for a reason she never saw coming: a tiny stray kitten. His obsession with control and perfection, which had always defined him as an architect, was a silent prison from which she had unknowingly escaped. But when a fatal flaw was found in his own masterpiece, fate orchestrated a shocking turn of events. You won't believe how an unexpected meeting brings their story full circle and reveals the final, bittersweet justice that neither of them could have ever predicted. Mina and Jun-ho had built a life that was, by all accounts, flawless. Their apartment was a testament to his architectural precision. Every book on the shelf was aligned, every surface was pristine, and a gentle silence filled the space like a carefully controlled hum. For 3 years, this was Mina's reality. It was a life of stability and order, and she had valued it deeply. But in the quiet moments of the evening, as they sat in separate corners of the living room, a creeping sense of emptiness would settle over her. She would look at their beautiful but lifeless home and feel a longing for something more, a small, spontaneous spark of joy. That longing became a sudden, powerful impulse. On a dreary Tuesday, while scrolling through a local animal rescue page, she saw him. A tiny, sooty black kitten no bigger than her hand, with huge, soulful amber eyes that seemed to hold all the loneliness in the world. His story was one of survival, a fragile life saved from the streets. In that instant, Mina's meticulously planned world shifted. She felt an urgent, undeniable need to give this small creature a home. She named him Jiji, and on the drive home, his soft, quiet purr was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She imagined Jun-ho's face, not angry, but surprised, and the way he would, eventually, fall in love with their new companion. The moment she opened the door, her beautiful fantasy crumbled. Jun-ho was standing by the window, a perfect picture of a man in control. But the moment his eyes landed on the small kitten in her arms, his face drained of all color. He didn't say a word. He just stood frozen, his breath catching in a shallow gasp. A faint red rash began to spread across his neck. His hands, usually so steady, trembled violently. "Jun-ho," she said, her voice laced with sudden fear. He shook his head, his eyes wide with a terror that went far beyond mere disapproval. In the terrifying chaos that followed, she learned the truth. It wasn't about control. It was about fear, a deeply buried, lifelong fear. He confessed to a childhood trauma involving stray cats and a severe, life-threatening allergy he had kept hidden his entire adult life. He had built his world on perfection and order, not for comfort, but for survival. His insistence on a sterile environment, on a predictable routine, it was all a cage he had built to protect himself. And Jiji, in all his innocent chaos, was a direct threat to the very foundation of his existence. The ensuing fight was brutal, not because of anger, but because of a devastating betrayal. Mina was heartbroken that he had never trusted her with such a fundamental secret. Jun-ho was terrified that she had recklessly endangered his life. The next morning, the silence was louder than any fight. His suitcase stood packed by the door. His side of the closet was empty. Their perfect shared calendar was a painful joke. Their world had shattered, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating realization that a love built on unspoken secrets was destined to fall apart the moment a beautiful, imperfect truth came knocking. The shock of Jun-ho's departure slowly gave way to a deep, all-consuming pain. It was a silence that screamed. The apartment, once a testament to their life together, now felt like a mausoleum. Mina found herself surrounded by ghosts. The perfect placement of his slippers by the bed, the way his favorite coffee mug still sat in the cupboard, the emptiness on his side of the closet. This wasn't a normal heartbreak. It was a wound that ran far deeper, a grief born from the sudden, cold realization that the foundation of their love had been a lie. She felt a profound sense of betrayal, not a betrayal of malice, but a betrayal of trust. For 3 years, Jun-ho had lived with a secret so fundamental to his existence that it had rendered their shared life a beautiful but fragile fantasy. She had loved a man she didn't truly know. The agony was in this very thought. Her friends tried to help, urging her to get angry, to move on, but their words felt hollow. They didn't understand the true nature of her loss. How could she be angry at a man who was so terrified he couldn't breathe? She was haunted by the image of his panic, his pleading eyes, not his callous words. Her only constant, her only anchor was Jiji. The kitten was blissfully unaware of the wreckage he had unintentionally caused. He would pad quietly across the apartment, a small, vibrant presence in the vast, empty space. In the evenings, he would curl up on her lap, a warm, purring bundle of fur, his gentle vibrations a physical comfort that no words could offer. Through Jiji, Mina began to rediscover a piece of herself, the part that was spontaneous, that craved warmth, that had dared to make an emotional, imperfect choice. He was a symbol of a life that Jun-ho couldn't share, a life that was now entirely her own. As the weeks blurred into a month, her pain began to shift. She started to see Jun-ho's meticulously planned life not as an act of control, but as an act of fear. His desire for order wasn't about being perfect for her. It was about protecting himself from a world that could, at any moment, unleash a silent, unseen threat. She began to see the years they spent together not as a prison she had escaped, but as a fragile sanctuary they had both shared, a sanctuary built on a silent truth that had to be maintained at all costs. She felt a profound, bittersweet sympathy for the man who had lost everything, not because he was cruel, but because he was so utterly and completely afraid. Months had passed since Jun-ho left. The sharp edges of heartbreak had finally begun to soften, leaving behind a manageable ache. Mina's life was no longer about surviving, it was about thriving. Her days were now filled with the simple, authentic joy of volunteering at the animal shelter. The constant purrs of cats and the happy yelps of puppies had replaced the sterile silence of her old apartment. Jiji, now a sleek and confident cat, was her devoted companion, a reminder of the beautiful, messy life she had chosen. She had built a new world for herself, a world filled with purpose and unexpected warmth. One afternoon, in the midst of this newfound peace, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Sora. The text was urgent. "Mina, you need to see this. You won't believe it." With a sense of foreboding, Mina clicked the link. The headline screamed across her screen. Architectural giant's grandest project halted due to fatal flaw. The article, written in a cold, unforgiving tone, detailed a catastrophic error in the building's foundation. The leading architect, the one responsible for the ruin, was Jun-ho. His reputation was in tatters, his career in ruins. Mina felt a jolt of emotion so sharp it took her breath away. It wasn't the vengeful satisfaction she might have once expected. It was a complex, suffocating anger. But the anger wasn't for him. It was for the brutal, poetic irony of the universe itself. Her mind reeled with the terrible symmetry of it all. Jun-ho, the man who had been so obsessed with structural integrity, so terrified of imperfection that he had destroyed their life over a simple, loving creature, had overlooked a fatal flaw in his own grand masterpiece. His need for a perfect, controlled life had blinded him to the one most critical flaw in his professional foundation. As Nina stood there, holding a bag of cat food and looking at the photo of the destroyed building, her heart ached not with a sense of vindication, but with profound sorrow. She saw that his meticulous nature wasn't a sign of his superiority. It was a fragile defense mechanism against a world he couldn't control. and now that very defense had been used against him. He had lost everything, not because he was cruel, but because he was so utterly consumed by fear. The anger she felt was a heartbreaking cry for the tragedy of it all, a life so meticulously built on a flawed foundation that it was destined to collapse. The news of Jun-ho's downfall was not a fleeting headline. It was a digital wildfire. His face, once a symbol of success and architectural genius, was now a meme, a cautionary tale. He was the subject of countless podcasts. His past projects were being reevaluated, and social media comment sections were a brutal, merciless sea of public judgment. People dissected his life with a detached cruelty, calling him arrogant, a fraud, a man who had finally been exposed. Mina watched it all unfold with a strange, heavy feeling in her chest. There was no sense of satisfaction, no dark pleasure in his misery, only a profound, aching pity. She found herself scrolling through the endless comments, not out of revenge, but out of a morbid, painful curiosity. The things people were saying, the harsh, impersonal attacks on his character, felt hollow and cruel. They judged a man they didn't know, a man who, in her mind, was not a villain, but a tragic figure. They saw his meticulous nature as arrogance. She saw it as a desperate form of self-preservation. She saw his obsession with control not as a character flaw, but as a direct consequence of a silent, lifelong fear. She realized that the public was punishing him for the very thing that had defined his entire identity, the same thing that had cost them their relationship. Amidst the roaring noise of the digital world, Mina found solace in the simple, quiet life she had built. Jiji, now a fully grown and majestic cat, padded silently into the room. He jumped onto the sofa, stretched out in a sunbeam, and began to purr. His tiny bell jingled softly as he settled down, a small, perfect sound in the overwhelming silence of her grief. He was a symbol of the life Jun-ho had rejected, a living, breathing flaw that had been deemed unacceptable. As Mina stroked Jiji's soft black fur, she realized the final, heart-wrenching irony. Jun-ho had torn their life apart over a perceived flaw, an imperfect, living creature, only to have his own life torn apart by a devastating, real flaw in his most perfect work. Her happiness wasn't a punishment for him. It was a testament to the fact that true beauty and peace are found not in sterile perfection, but in the warmth of unconditional love and the messy, unpredictable joys of life. She didn't want him to suffer. She just wanted him to have found the peace she had, the peace that came from letting go. The animal shelter had become Mina's sanctuary. She was now a full-time employee, her days filled with the quiet, joyful chaos of caring for animals. The air hummed with the soft purrs of cats, the gentle rustle of hay, and the occasional happy bark of a newly adopted dog. It was a world of unconditional love, a perfect antithesis to the sterile, controlled life she once knew. One cold afternoon, as she was helping to move supplies, her boss led a new volunteer into the main room. Mina's hands froze, her heart stopping in her chest. It was Jun-ho. The brilliant, meticulous architect she once knew was gone. He stood there, a shadow of his former self, in ill-fitting clothes and with a tired, defeated slump to his shoulders. The cold, polished armor he once wore was stripped away, leaving a man who looked utterly broken. She later learned the details from her boss. After the scandal, the courts had ordered him to perform community service to help settle his fines. The judge, an avid animal lover, had made the profoundly ironic choice to assign him here. His penance would be to live and work among the very creatures that had cost him everything. As she moved past him, their eyes met. The moment was an eternity. On his face, she saw a complex mixture of shock, searing shame, and a deep, agonizing remorse. He saw her, the woman he had discarded for being unpredictable, now thriving, radiant, and radiating a sense of peace he had never possessed. He was forced to spend his days cleaning cages, feeding stray cats, and caring for the vulnerable lives he had once so callously rejected. He was trapped in the very environment he had spent his life avoiding, a living embodiment of the tragic flaw he had carried. But Mina felt no triumph, no cold, vengeful justice. Instead, a wave of profound and sorrowful understanding washed over her. She saw him not as a villain, but as a man who had lost everything because he was a prisoner of his own fear. His suffering was not her victory. It was a heartbreaking consequence of his own choices. The true justice, she realized, was not his downfall. It was the fact that she had found a life filled with purpose, with the warmth of unconditional love from Jiji, and with a sense of freedom that she never knew she was missing. As she quietly smiled and walked past him to get more supplies, she wasn't gloating, she was letting go. Her smile was a final act of closure, a quiet acknowledgement that her happiness was separate from his misery. It was the ultimate, peaceful resolution, a love story that ended not with revenge, but with the liberating warmth of forgiveness.